So this is a very quick presentation around Flask-Appbuilder. It's a Flask extension. We'll talk about it generally, and a real-world experience using the new REST API that was developed on Flask-Appbuilder on the Apache Superset project, moving from a server-side rendering application to a single-page app application, and having a very consistent REST API there. So about me quickly, so Gaspar, I'm Daniel Gaspar, software developer and DevOps engineer for several years now. I've been contributing to several open source projects for 5 years now, actively contributing, creator and maintainer of Flask-Appbuilder. I'm a Apache Superset committer and PPMC member, and was a co-author of a book around Flask web development, its second edition. So we will be talking about Flask-Appbuilder. What is it? It's new REST API and that real world experience with Apache Superset. And at the end, if we have time, just a quick example, gathering monitoring metrics from the API. So Flask-Appbuilder, what is it? It's a Flask extension inspired on Flask-Admin and Django-Admin. Low-code, rapid application development there, highly configurable. Autocrat, server-side rendering. Up until now, you have a new REST API also. So it has security handled for you with several authentication providers like database, WAF, LDAP, remote, and very, very granular permissions at the class endpoint method. So just to have a quick look at this with very low code, for example, with more or less just this, okay? If you know Flask-Admin or Django-Admin, this will be familiar to you. You can easily have an application instantly with users. Users are associated with roles, and you get the permission mapping that the Flask-Appbuilder will infer from your class model views and the methods you declare there. Or if you use Autocrat, it will automatically create you can add, you can edit, you can list, you can delete. So you can granularly tweak around the permissions and make roles by them. This is the Autocrat out of the box with just plain bootstrap server-side rendering. You can order by every field and do pagination, and you can filter by any field that's declared on your model by default, and with all the operations that are available from SQL Alchemy for you to filter the fields. You can filter by multiple fields. If it's a relationship, it will handle a Dropbox for you for the user to choose the value for it. So just a quick look. These are some applications, the most famous ones that use Flask-Appbuilder in here. We have Superset using the new REST API and React components for the list custom develop. Starting to look really good. This is Airflow. This is what we've seen. It's just the plain example there for Flask-Appbuilder, very simple example. And this is another example of an application using the REST API, React components with a model form, for example. Okay, just a quick look. So the new REST API, it's I've developed it to be very similar to the server-side rendering declaration for the classes. It has more or less the same class attributes there. So you have a really easy migration from server-side rendering to single-page app or REST API. As you can see here, I don't know if you can see the pointer. On a very simple class declaration for Autocrat, you say, okay, I want Autocrat from my SQL Alchemy model contact group. And on the list, I just want to see the name. So this is more, this is it will handle this. Okay, you get the form and you get the add field just to have a register, sorting and filtering, basic stuff. And for having a REST API, you declare it more or less the same. This is a very simple configuration one, but it's very, very predictable, the path for migration from server-side rendering to having a server REST API. So the new REST API has great detail on performance itself, on SQL Alchemy queries for filtering. And when you declare the list columns, you can use dot notation there for it to infer the necessary joins it has to do on the SQL Alchemy. So it's very performant. So it will do its best to avoid the n+1 problem for having one additional query for each row, for example, on when it gets a list of models from that database engine. So the response from the REST API has lots of metadata that you can choose or not choose for the response to come. It will do, it has customizable OpenAPI specs, so nothing like seeing it. So this example is available on GitHub. Okay. So when you declare the REST API itself, you get Autocrat. If you want to use it with Autocrat, you're not forced in using it in Autocrat. So you get the permissions, detailed permissions for its expose endpoints, and it will infer the OpenAPI schema for you by default. You can override it and use your own custom Marshmallow schema with custom validations, whatever you want there, and override the default, or else it will infer the SQL Alchemy model and generate the schema for you on the spec, on the OpenAPI spec. So this is a very simple example. For a contact model, you have fields like gender, name, but interesting here is that the contact model has a relationship with the group, so it belongs to a group, and the contact person itself belongs to a gender. Could be an enum here, it would be more elegant, but it's nice to see the relationship also. So here, gender is actually another SQL Alchemy model. So you get the OpenAPI spec inferred for free for you, so you have the example. Also, interesting is that I chose to use Ryzen query parameters. We'll talk about it a bit later. I think they are pretty powerful, but it has a little limitation. So let's take a quick look for a very simple example. We will do an endpoint that will sum two numbers, really simple, but we can see how you can declare custom endpoints using this pattern for Flask-Appbuilder and security and roles-based access. So Ryzen here, this at green on this URL, okay, this query parameter here is Ryzen. So this is the Ryzen representation for a JSON object that has a key A, that's a number, and the key V, it's a number, and then the endpoint will give you the answer, the sum. Okay, so on code, this looks like this. So you declare, you can do it some other way. You can just use Flask for it. Flask-Appbuilder won't get in your way if you want just to use Flask, but I really like this pattern because you get for free the query parameters are schema verified. So if the client side sends you a key that's a string, it will just send you HTTP 400. So it's not a valid request, and will say, hey, it should be a number and not a string, and you get that for free. So you don't have to code those things. You just have to declare your JSON schema. Then you say to the base API, this is the base API, it's not Autocrat. On this part is an example for a custom endpoint that will sum two numbers, and you declare the sum schema there. And then on the doc string for the method itself, you declare the OpenAPI spec, where you reference, okay, so for the query parameters, it will use this schema, you get the validation for free, and the infer for Swagger UI, you get the documentation for free, and then you declare what's your response with a well-behaved documentation. And then you, on your method, you get a dictionary on the Ryzen schema where you can fetch your values that are already parsed for you. So Autocrat on the REST API, Autocrat, it's really nice if you want to custom develop something. You should custom develop if it's really simple what you want to expose on a certain REST API namespace. Please use Autocrat. It will really increase your development cycle. It's great for proof of concepts, for example, and spinning up an application that will do a proof of concept. You will do it on no time. So it has customizable OpenAPI spec, as we already seen, the Ryzen parameters also. I think it's interesting to see. On this case, this is the default for Autocrat on the Ryzen parameters. For the get list, for example, on this to get a list of contacts, okay? So you can choose the columns, for example, you can choose the columns that you want. By default, it will show all columns on your model, okay? But let's say I just want name, okay? You get a bunch of metadata, and here the result will just get you the name, okay? And you can then go there and say, okay, I want address also, or better yet, I want the related model, okay? And then you get the result with the contact with the related model and the name itself. So this is the power also for the Ryzen query parameters. With Flask-Appbuilder, you get to filter by a list and getting us possibility of operations on all the fields. You can say, okay, on metadata, I don't want metadata. Give me just the results and the count. So you can sort and you get pagination for free. So everything that you want, that you would expect, and you should implement on the get list endpoint on the REST API. Okay. You get also translations, server-side translations, because Flask-Appbuilder uses Flask Babel. That's really nice. So it's translated now in 13 languages. Community contributed. It's awesome. Okay, and you can then extend on your application. You can use your own translations, and the model, the server-side rendering part will use that, and the REST API also can send you metadata with the translations for the fields and the title for your page, and you can use, and everything will work seamlessly and nicely. Okay. So this is the example I was showing to you. A very simple declaration for a model REST API, and then you get the OpenAPI spec with the CRUD already inferred for you, with a delete endpoint, a put endpoint to change the model, create new models on post, what you would expect. And here you have the declaration, okay, on the related model, I want just the name field on the result. And this is server side. So if you lock it on the server, the client won't be able to say, oh no, I want his birthday also. No, we have just exposed these free fields. The client side can call the REST API and say, oh no, I want less, but it will never get out of scope of what was defined on the server. Of course, this is for example, for security. Okay, and you have the OpenAPI schema here. So now I would like to talk a little bit for a real world example of application of the new REST API on Apache Superset. It's a really amazing tool for data visualization. It's used by hundreds of companies like Airbnb, Lyft, Dropbox. Well, and what I wanted to say is that Airbnb, Lyft, Dropbox And we at Preset are very, very active maintainers. It's a very, very active project on repo, really, really moving fast. It has a distributed architecture, so it will scale really nicely. It uses salary workers to do heavy queries at the analytics database, because this is an analytics data visualization tool. It supports dozens of analytics backends, BigQuery, Snowflake, Presto, Druid, Vertica, Elasticsearch, and it uses SQL Alchemy dialects to do so. The integration is done. You create a DB API compatible Python driver, and then you create this Alchemy dialect, and you are more or less ready to go to integrate it with Apache Superset. That is what it has been done. This is Apache Superset. Some pictures of it, has amazing dashboards, and the server-side rendering. Oh, let me just show you here. This is the latest version on the master repo. Sorry. Okay, these are the demo dashboards that come with Apache Superset. This is the deck.jl. These are, I think they are pretty impressive, these ones. Okay, let me get your data mapped here, travels with hikes, etc. And now Apache Superset is opening up its shards, so everyone can write their own shards and plugins and use them and integrate them on Superset. I think that will be also next. So the migration is going on. We are migrating also. Apache Superset adds lots of HTTP custom development endpoints, but we are now taking the chance to organize them and have a very predictable REST API namespace that people can use, and the documentation using OpenAPI spec is really organized with really detailed descriptions and whatnot. We want to take the chance to really do it right. We decided to use a mix by Flask-Appbuilder, Autocrat, Magic, and mixed with custom developed endpoints, especially for mutations like post, put, deletes. They are custom developed. And then on the get endpoints, we trust on Flask-Appbuilder and Magic for doing the sorting and filtering and whatnot. Well, we also use a base class on Superset where we impose a base configuration for every resource namespaces for the REST API. So we have a parent class that every class will inherit that has a base configuration. That's a really simple pattern that works really good. By the way, we have been improving a lot code quality there. Type annotation on Python, I think it's awesome and it's worth it. Pluggable visualization of Superset and improving tests a lot, and code coverage to use features. We have migrated to PyTest not that long ago. I think it was last week, for example. It's working good. This is an example we already see for Apache Superset. This is our deployed on preset. So challenges. So this is not a quick migration to server-side rendering or a single step to a single page application. These views that are fed by the REST API and with React components are behind feature flags. So you get the let's call it the classical Apache Superset using that server-side rendering from Flask-Appbuilder. But if you enable it, and lots of people are really enabling that feature flag, you get the new React components that look really nice and are very performant. So we had some problems. Well, we had to address the N+1 queries on SQL Alchemy, that was addressed on Superset and on Flask-Appbuilder also. It's the business logic. I already told you about it. We both they were custom developed there, and we ended up with really simple and thin endpoint code. So the endpoint, the custom endpoint just calls the business logic component, and the business logic component does what it has to do. If something fails or the validation fails, it will just raise an exception. That is a child from a Marshmallow schema exception, a validation error. Okay, so everything will play nicely. Your Marshmallow schema is validated against a base data structure. Then the business unit will validate business validations and will integrate with that Marshmallow type exception. So the endpoint code is really simple. You just do this and catch the exceptions. Next, instead of catching the exceptions, we will just throw the exceptions and register a Flask handle to handle the errors itself, because the exceptions can say, oh, this exception is HTTP status code 400, and the message is like this, and you get a specific error code, for example. So you let Flask handle that really nicely. That's a really nice feature of Flask, for example. And finally, I don't know how much time do I have. So
I think it's over. It's over just now.
Is it over?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So just finishing up, just wrapping up. This is the last part. It's an example I posted here on how to gather metrics for your API endpoints using, well, of course, a decorator. And on Flask-Appbuilder, you can override the headless methods that are not decorated yet, and you just wrap them and gather the metrics. This is, I think this is really important and basic stuff. You want to gather your application performance HTTP endpoints really precisely. And this is just for timing how much milliseconds an endpoint takes. And that's it. Next steps, less verbose OpenAPI spec, increase the path forest recursion for the magical joins on Flask-Appbuilder. Would like to do that and work on the React generic components. I think that's a lot of value there, and would like to decouple the authentication out of Flask-Appbuilder and make it more pluggable and other GitHub repos and lots more, but these are the main things. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, Daniel. That was a great presentation. Do we have any questions for Daniel?
Yes, please. Some questions.
Well, I have one question. You know, now even Apache Airflow uses Flask-Builder, but let me ask you how you first thought of starting Flask-Builder, Flask-Appbuilder.
Well, my first, it was by my own personal need, actually. I was broad. I knew Django and Django admin reasonably well. Okay, then Counter Flask. I really liked its API and the way it works. So it's simple and powerful. That's two things that married together are not that common. Okay, so really liked it. And then, well, it was a challenge by challenge, and that's why I've done it. So I get initially, to be honest, I really got obsessed by developing it, because I've done it during the nighttime, but I was developing on the bus and on the train on my way home because, well, I was excited with it. And now, well, it's been 4 years, 5 years it was created. Well, and to be honest, when it reaches a certain scale, it's a lot of work to maintain. Lots of people are using it, lots of questions. I would like to answer more and be more dedicated maintainer, but I think it's going okay. But well,
and one thing people don't like to touch is about theming. So what is the theming support of
Bootstrap, like I said, okay. It comes loaded with Bootwatch, so it's really simple for you to change themes, and that's really easy. If you want to do it really customized for you, so you, for example, Airflow adopted that, the theming, so you just change the configuration value and you have like 13 to 15 themes, different themes, Bootstrap, Bootwatch themes, but you can custom them and play around with CSS from Bootstrap and do very different things. Like you can see on I don't know if I'm still sharing, I think so. Like you can see here, right? This is theme. You can already customize you can already recognize the default Flask-Appbuilder behind it, but it's theme.
Yes.
It's not heavily theme, but it's different, right?
Yes, yes.
And with the React components, well, the sky is limit. You can whatever you want, okay? And you can actually, doing the REST API and the React components now, you can actually use whatever web framework you want and CSS framework. And well, the sky is the limit. No.
Because you know, people are interested, like if it's open to customize it to their own liking. So that's why I was asking. And okay, I don't see any more questions. I don't see. So I think Flask-Appbuilder deserves some more love because unfortunately I did not know until I invited like Mr. Gaspar to FlaskCon. I did not submit a talk. I did not know about the Flask-Appbuilder, that it powers this and that. And I think that maybe many of my projects myself, I would have chosen the Flask-Appbuilder had I known such a thing existed, because it's you know, it really simplifies everything. And yes.
Yes, it does. Well, it isn't a generic magic bullet. Sometimes you have to find the balance where you should custom develop your application, and when it's nice to let Flask-Appbuilder render dull stuff for you that you are always repeating when developing, for example. And that's a balance. And if you find it, you will rapidly develop whatever application you want with it, for example. And the REST API, I think it's really nice. Of course I do. Yes, thanks for the invitation. Any more questions?
Okay, I don't see any question on
No, we
YouTube.
don't have. Thanks, Daniel, again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much for.
Thank you. Thank you.